Well, hello there. Good afternoon, and I want to welcome you to one of our periodic Q&A sessions. If you've been to one of these with us before, you'll know that you can use your comment box wherever you're watching this video, whether that's Facebook or YouTube or one of the other platforms. Just type your comment or question, and whether you're here with me live, I will see that comment or question, and I will be able to respond to you right here and now while while we are looking at the camera together. Or if you're watching a replay later on after the fact, then I will still see that comment and I will incorporate that into a future session. So it won't get lost. It won't disappear down the internet black hole. But yeah, I will, one way or the other, I will get back around to your comment and question. So to kick off today, I'm actually going to start with one of the most frequently asked questions. In fact, like frequent is kind of an understatement with this one. I'm speaking to this question all the time, and it comes up all the time. And there's a very good reason for it. And I hope we'll start to get more clarity about this topic and why it's such a common question. And it's a simple question, and it's simply, what is a healing reaction? And I will be explaining that in full. But even the words right there, healing reaction. People hear the word reaction and they don't like that so much. They don't want something like, if they take one of the homeopathic remedies that I give them, they don't want a reaction. That sounds scary. It sounds unpredictable. What is it? What's going to happen to me? And as I say, this can really freak people out. I don't. It's not just that it can freak people out. It does. I know, because this question comes up so often. So, anyways, let's get right into it. So, as I started by saying, we have these two words, healing, reaction. So that in itself is already a good place to start. We'll look at what's inside of those two words. What do they mean? What does that little phrase mean? And we probably won't have to go too much further than just analyzing those two words to really get a grasp on this topic. So the first thing that we start with, the word healing, right away we know that you've probably heard me say in other contexts before, everything in Heilkunst medicine and human physiology and this whole world, this whole area that we work in, is built on functional polarities. Everything about life, everything about health and illness and treatment, all these things that we're focused on are always built on polarity. So it's a great rule of thumb. If you're studying anything in this area, or just even wanting to have a conversation about such topics, always start with that in the back of your mind. These ideas of functional polarities, which are, you can't get away from them. As I say, you're dealing with life, you're dealing with health, whatever the case is, you're going to be dealing with functional polarity. So the reason I'm emphasizing that so much is it's a really good thought process, a really good habit to, anytime you encounter some concept within this world of healthcare, within Heilkunst, somewhere in the back of your mind, you should be like holding a bookmark that you're looking, or at least you're waiting for the functional polarity or the counterpart to come into the picture and marry up with that first concept you heard, because no concept really exists in isolation, as I say, especially in these functional polarities of life. But it's always looking for, it's kind of like the age old question of dating and finding a mate. We're always, whether for ourselves or socially, we know somebody, we meet somebody, we're friends with somebody, whatever, and we're always either they are partnered, or we're always kind of holding in the back of our minds, I wonder how and if and when they're going to find the right partner for themselves. We always, anything that has life, as I'm saying, we're always looking for this functional polarity that goes with it. So anyways, that's your just general rule of thumb. And all of that, took me 3-4 minutes to say all that, which is really my framework, or my way of introducing that first word. We have healing reaction, the first word, healing. Well, what's the functional polarity of healing is actually the word curing. And that polarity between healing and curing is a big master polarity within Heilkunst. And specifically in the concept we're talking about today of a healing reaction, this gets right to the heart of, if our question is what is a healing reaction? Well, the the healing part of a healing reaction, and actually the reaction part already gives us the clue. We're talking about something that happened after something. Something happens and then there's a reaction. So the reaction means that it's kind of an after the fact kind of thing. So the healing is something that happens after the fact, and then that begs the question, well, what is that a reaction to? What is healing in reaction to? And as I've already given away the answer, the healing is in reaction to the curing. So the curing happens first, and then the healing is able to happen afterwards. And even more specifically, the curing is a direct function of the medicine, and the healing is a direct function of our innate healing power, our body's life force. So the curing is a function of medicine, the healing is a function of our innate healing power or our life force. And that word reaction gives you that clue, which is the two are directly tied together. It's a reaction, so one happens as a result of the other. So I'm just giving you the big framework here, but healing reaction, we have healing as the functional polarity to curing, and we have the idea of the reaction, meaning it is second. Another set of vocabulary we can use in substitution here is we say there's an initial action and then there's a counteraction. So initial action, counteraction. So in the whole, I'll use the German word, the whole heilen process, that German verb of heilen, to heal, includes this dual concept within itself, includes the curing, includes the healing. So this biphasic reaction, as I've already said now, this healing reaction really belongs to you and your life force, the human life force. It's creating the healing reaction. Okay, so let's get a little more concrete in some ways and a little more specific now. So in terms of some of the practical realities of all this, it sort of ties to another common question. I'm just going to sneak it in here because it goes here as well. And that has to do with the timing of everything. So, just give me one half of a footnote here. Before we get into the timing, I'm going to make one more distinction. If we're talking about functional polarities and everything, if we're talking about remedies and diseases and healing reactions and all these things, another distinction we need to make is between the really acute diseases, that are very short-lived, versus the chronic protracted diseases. And with that in particular, with the distinction I want to make there, when it comes to treatment and what the outcome that we expect, when we're dealing with an acute disease, let's say a classic acute infection like influenza, or a childhood infection like chicken pox or something like that, we know that these diseases are acute in nature, meaning they're very intense and short-lived. And an analogy that can often be used is they're like a short one-act play. It's not like a long, like multi-hour Andrew Lloyd Webber musical or something like that. It's a very, very short story, basically. They have a very quick beginning, middle, and end. It's all over before you even blink an eye, as it were, and kind of you're on with things. Now, when it comes to the acute disease, the end can be death. Of course, that is a possible ending, but whether the person overcomes the disease or the disease overcomes them, it's not gonna be a long story. It's gonna be a few intense hours, a few days at the most. It's here, it's gone, and that's it. It's an acute disease. So that's I'm saying all that. Those acute diseases are actually not under the category of what we're talking about with a healing reaction. The acute diseases, when you give the homeopathic medicine for that, you don't really have much of any healing reaction in that process. What you do have there is what's called a homeopathic aggravation. In other words, that where I say the cure belongs to the remedy. Well, in the case of an acute disease like that, most of the action, almost all of it, happens on the side of the cure. So in other words, the acute disease is happening. You give the similar medicine. That's the definition of homeopathy. Similar curative medicine, or like cures like, and that not healing reaction, but that homeopathic aggravation is happening during the curative phase, because that's where all the action is. The disease is intense, it's hot, and it's happening, the fever is happening, whatever. You give the remedy, and that slightly aggravates or exacerbates the situation. So that's why it's called a homeopathic aggravation. And almost inconsequential, you're barely ever going to even notice anything on this lines in the homeopathic aggravation. Afterwards, you're not going to really see the healing reaction, or unless you have some kind of super detection installed into your intuition or whatever. You're basically gonna go through that virtually undetectable. So the homeopathic aggravation is prominent there. But then when we switch to the other category of disease, the the long protracted chronic disease, that's where we get into our topic of this question. That's where the initial action is virtually indetectable in that case. Maybe very, very, very slight, but virtually nothing really. And then when you get to the healing reaction, that's where all the action is happening in a chronic disease. So two different types of disease, and you can expect to really experience two very different kinds of polarities there. Or it's the same polarity, but one side is really emphasized in one, the other side is really emphasized in the other. So that's the big framework. And what I was really wanting to talk about here is the timing of all that. So again, back to chronic protracted disease. When we're in the treatment process for chronic disease, it's unlike a quick onset fever and something, it's something that someone has had for months, years, decades. They've lived with it for a long time. These are kind of slow, persistent symptoms. Yeah, they may bother the person, but they can kind of forget about them because they've had them for so long. And it's not until you talk about it, it's like, oh yeah, and I've had this thing for 20 years. I've had this symptom, I've had that. So these long, slow chronic diseases is now when we're in the domain where there's actually going to be a noticeable healing reaction. And the timing, as I'm talking about within all this, in our treatment process, by and large, really follows the lunar cycle, right? The 28-day lunar cycle. And the thing, so that's, at a practical level, this is the reason when it comes to scheduling, when we schedule a patient's appointments and when we schedule their follow-ups, generally when they're in a treatment plan for dealing with some underlying chronic disease, we are wanting to optimize that treatment plan to that 28-day lunar cycle. And the reason being, when I talk about this biphasic response, the initial action and the healing reaction, when it comes to a chronic disease, that treatment rhythm, by and large, fits somewhere within that 28 days. Again, it could be 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Like it's going to have that life variability to it, but it's going to kind of be averaging around that 28 days. So as I've already said in other words before, that initial action, which you're generally not going to notice in the case of chronic disease, is virtually instantaneous, if not a few minutes or a very small number of hours at the very most. But then it kind of shifts over, and as you head to somewhere towards the middle of that 28 days, that's where you really start to hit the peak of that healing reaction. So that's what we tell people, as they're going through their treatment process, and they come to learn this, as they experience the remedies and they kind of get to know themselves through how they respond to the treatment. They start to learn their own body and their own rhythms of where that healing reaction tends to be showing up for them. For some people, it's around maybe 10 days, 12 days, 15 days, even up to 18, 21. That's getting a little bit late. We're getting away from the middle there. But somewhere in that middle zone of that 28-day lunar cycle is where they're going to tend to have this peak of the healing reaction. Now, staying on this tone of being really practical, so we have a time frame that's very practical. You could mark that on your calendar. You can understand what to expect. The other practical thing to expect about a healing reaction is one or another of the many meanings of the biological or psychological experience of some kind of discharge. So, and think about this, we do this all the time, just in our natural life functions. We eat food and we excrete it, right? We go to the bathroom, we excrete whatever we haven't assimilated, whatever we don't need. That's a basic life discharge. But when it comes more specifically to the healing reaction after the remedy, that discharge can, again, be any of the natural biological discharges, going to the bathroom, more frequently than usual or in an unusual way, loose stools and all this kind of thing, vomiting, sweating, tears, all the physical discharges of the body, or or it can be also on the emotional psychological level. So dream content can erupt in the person. They have really intense dreams about a certain topic, or during the daytime they may have an upsurge of certain discharge of emotions. An upsurge of, name your emotion. Sadness, tears, grief, anger, frustration, irritability. The whole gamut. That can also be an upsurge of an emotional psychological discharge. So again, somewhere in that middle zone of that 28-day lunar cycle, we're going to really hit the peak of this healing reaction. So that's, I said, this gives us some practical, tangible things here. It gives us a time framework. It gives us what to expect. But ultimately, after all is said and done, somewhere as you get towards the end and then beyond that natural 28-day cycle, you're long past the intensity of the healing reaction. You've come out the other side, and that's where you can say the ultimate goal of that whole physiological process really can happen, and that's the deepest part of healing, which is really a full integration. So again, whether that's we're dealing with a physical healing, somebody, what would be an example? Somebody, actually, here I have a real life example. This was, I had a slight burn in the kitchen on my finger here a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just fascinated. I was watching it day by day by day. As it blistered and skin peeled, and there's some pus and things kind of oozed out, and this whole natural process happened. And now you can barely even see that there was a mark anymore, and it's truly miraculous. It's like, how does our body know? It's like, yeah, that's what the finger is supposed to look like when you're done rebuilding it. Like, is there a blueprint in a back office somewhere, or like, I'm being a little goofy when I talk like that, but yeah, it's truly this whole process of healing is, is I say, belongs to our innate healing power, and it's long after you've taken the remedy. The remedy doesn't have the blueprint. All the remedy knows is to how to kind of trigger the whole process of repair. It's like all it can do is point and identify, here's the problem. It puts police tape around it, says, okay, here's the problem. This is the nature of the problem, as kind of encoded in the information of the remedy. And then when the innate healing power takes over, that's where that so-called blueprint comes in. And it's the damage has now been cleared away, and now the rebuilding and repair is happening. So anyways, I forget the point I was making there. I suddenly remembered my burn on my finger. Got so excited I had a real example. I forgot what I was illustrating there. But I know we're talking about all these practical things. That I remember now. So you have that whole process, the 28-day time frame. You have the curing, the healing, all that happens, and then finally you get to that end stage. The ultimate goal of all curing and healing processes is that your body, your mind completes a full integration of whatever the meaning of that disease or that emotional trauma or whatever it was. That actually can now be fully integrated. So why I'm making that particular point is one of the most important reasons for patients to come to understand this idea, what is a healing reaction and what's going to happen during their treatment and all that. I've seen it too many times when somebody doesn't really get that, or they understood it to some level, but they don't realize it's happening when it's happening. They forget that I explained all this to them. They will may often go off and do something that's suppressive. So they're having a healing reaction. They're maybe getting a tickle in their throat, a cough, whatever, some kind of symptoms, and they think that they're getting a cold or getting a sore throat, or in other words, they think they've been exposed to some kind of disease that they're now suffering. Back to our distinction between chronic and acute disease. So we're treating a chronic disease in the patient, and then they mistakenly think that they're having an acute disease, which they're not. They're having a healing reaction. A healing reaction is not the same as a disease. It may appear to be to the uninitiated. It's like, I've had these symptoms before, and the doctor gave me antibiotics before, so they think, oh, I have the thing again, same thing I've had before. I'm going to go to the doctor again, get the antibiotics, and cure my sore throat or whatever it is. Unfortunately, it's not a disease. It's not a sore throat in that sense of a pathogenic infection, but it's a healing reaction. And by getting the antibiotics, now all the good work that our healing power is doing, of going through that healing process, pushing things out, doing the repair, doing all this stuff, that process now gets suspended, halted right in place, and in fact reversed. So now that the disease material that was being pushed out of the body in the healing reaction now gets pushed back in, plus extra toxins get pushed in on top of it. So it's that old expression about sweeping things under the rug. Well, that's the quintessential sweeping things under the rug. So the disease that you were successfully pushing out, you've now pushed back in, where it doesn't want to, really, your body doesn't want it. You want it to get rid of it. But so, it's pushing it back in, and we're really setting up a situation where we not only have to redo the curing and the healing work that we almost succeeded at here, but in fact we have a little bit more to do on top. It's kind of like adding compound interest on the top to boot. So now you have your original disease back again with some extra disease matter thrown in as a bonus on top. So anyways, that's one of the most important reasons to understand the concept of the healing reaction when you're going through the treatment process, is so that you understand how to manage it. So let's talk about a more positive approach to managing a healing reaction. First of all, is just simply the knowledge, the knowledge of what it is and what's happening, and that it's ultimately a positive thing, that it's not a disease, it's an actual healing process. And the knowledge that most of the time, almost all of the time, it's not overly intense. It's it may be a little bit inconvenient, a little bit irritating, temporarily and so on, but very rarely does it get into a zone of high intensity, especially for a high extended period of time. That is an extremely rare situation. Now, even then, of course, we will use the appropriate homeopathic remedies at that time to help the person out of that intensity and to continue forward, in the right direction of finishing the healing reaction, rather than going backwards in a suppressive direction, like I gave the example of with the antibiotics for the so-called sore throat. So anyways, that's the importance of understanding the healing reaction, so you don't freak out about it. You know what you're dealing with. You know how to deal with it. And generally what we say is, we will already provide you with remedies ahead of time, to help support your system in general, to support all your detox mechanisms, all your drainage organs, your liver, kidney, skin, all the rest. You'll have all those remedies from us, just so that your body can be doing what it does best. When it gets to that healing reaction, it won't have any interference with those natural functions. And as well, if the healing is more at the emotional, psychological level, there's a whole range, there's a whole world really of things that you can support yourself with. Anything from for formal counseling, to private journaling, to just kind of some people work through their dreams. They'll kind of ask themselves a question at night about whatever their life issue they're going through is, and or even write it down, put it under their pillow, so they're kind of really focusing on that. And when they train themselves, they can really tend to have a clear healing dream that comes in the night. So anyways, I'm just using that as an example, but just to say there's all these different means of support of helping the discharge, helping the integration, helping really the understanding of what's going on, so that the healing can be thorough. And of course, underneath all of that is the constant life support of good diet and drinking enough water and having a good exercise routine, all the things that we do to support our body. Same thing applies here. You want to keep that support system strong and keep all your good habits and all the rest of it, and add all that together, and you get way more than 99% of the time a healing reaction that's not too bothersome and is actually quite beneficial in the end. So that's, let me just review my little notes I have here to make sure there wasn't another major point here, but Yeah, I've hit on all the main points. So yeah, so there you go. Healing reactions, they're your friends. Don't suppress them. Um, and as I said at the beginning, if you have any comments on this particular topic or further questions or a completely different topic, you can certainly add your comment in to wherever it is you're watching this video. And as I say, if that's live, I will respond to you live, or if you only catch this later as a replay, likewise, I will catch your comment as a comment replay and I will bring it into the next live discussion. So I'll just keep this open for another half minute or so in case anyone is typing a question, but otherwise, thank you for joining me today, and I will see you in the next Q&A session.